Bayonetta.
Bayonetta 3 was my second most anticipated game of 2022, only behind Shadow Warrior 3. I love action games, and it seems like we don't really get a lot of action games anymore, at least in the same style and caliber as games like Bayonetta. The trailer for the game looked incredible, and I had high hopes going into it, especially being released so close to God of War Ragnarok, to use as an example of what an action game should actually look like. Hype would be an understatement. And in a lot of ways, Bayonetta 3 delivered on the hype. It delivers the chaotic, frantic, high adrenaline action experience that I was seeking. It delivers on being a complex action game, with hundreds of combos and dozens of weapons to learn, presented in a sexy, over-the-top way. In a lot of ways, it delivers on being the best action game since Devil May Cry 5. But it also delivers one of the most disappointingly unsatisfying stories and, quite frankly, horrible endings for a video game that I have played in a long time. Now, typically story isn't my focus in games. To me, a good story is nice, but it's not necessary for a game to be good. Most of my favorite games have little to no story, or even bad stories. I'm very much a gameplay first kind of guy, and the gameplay is where Bayonetta 3 succeeds. So when it comes down to it, I would say that I liked this game, for sure. But this is really the first time that I can think of where a story, at least the game's ending, was so bad that it brought a game that had great gameplay down for me. I was honestly in shock that this was the direction that they decided to take the story in, and it honestly makes me a little worried for the future of the franchise. Before I get into the nitty-gritty, I just want to address the presentation. Graphically, it leaves a bit of a bad first impression. I'm not really sure if other people felt the same way, but the opening cutscene just felt off to me. My initial reaction was, holy shit, this looks worse than Bayonetta 2 on the Wii U. Textures looked low res, and above all, it had noticeable frame rate issues. I was a little worried getting into it, but oddly enough, I feel like these issues sorted themselves out the more that I played the game. There were instances of rough textures here and there, but as a whole, the game looked more on par with at least Bayonetta 2, and the frame rate issues weren't as noticeable at all beyond that first cutscene. So I don't know if it was a case of where I just got used to it, or if that first cutscene was loaded weird, or what, but that's how I felt. The game isn't amazing graphically, but it fits the aesthetic of Bayonetta well. The game functioned well for the majority of my time too, with no game-ruining frame dips. I don't think it runs at a perfect 60 FPS, at least as far as I can tell. I didn't run any frame rate tests. It was playable for me for sure, but I still can't get over how bad that first cutscene felt to me. With that said, the sexiness and zaniness that we expect from Bayonetta is present and accounted for. Bayonetta is still a sexy witch who wears her hair as clothes and performs risque dances to cast spells using her hair, which means yes, she still sheds her clothes as she performs spells. There's an optional child filter this time around though, which removes the nudity, though the swearing and gore are still intact. Franchise characters make a return. Enzo, Bayonetta's sketchy friend, there for comic relief. Rodan, Bayonetta's demon friend who runs the bar that everyone hangs out at. Rodan would previously give you upgrades on weapons, though now his shop is mainly used for consumable items and unlockables. Juan, Bayonetta's childhood best friend and the only other remaining Umbran witch in the world. And Luca, Bayonetta's clumsy goofball love interest. As a franchise, Bayonetta stories have always been more extreme and out there. It's a wild anime-esque game with near immortal witches who fight angels and demons. Bayonetta has literally defeated gods. It features heaven and hell and travel through time and space. I get that, I understand that, I like that about the series. It's wild, it's funny, it's unhinged. Bayonetta 3 takes place after the events of the first two games. Having defeated the forces of heaven and hell, a new threat has appeared. The homunculi, man-made monsters going around destroying multiverses. Yes, this is a multiverse story, and here's where I have to rant. I am sick to death of fucking multiverse stories. Very few multiverse stories are actually good. Very few feel earned, and very few tell any worthwhile story that doesn't just cave to character bastardization and fan service. Multiverses have become a crutch, a way for writers to get around established lore, story continuity, and characterization. The quote-unquote "well in this version" argument, used especially by Marvel and DC media creators to get around inaccuracies in how their characters are depicted, or a way to provide a soft reboot for a universe. It's lazy and a symptom of shitty writing. The end results are stories that do not matter, that have no weight, and often have no consequence. I will take a fleshed out, well-written story with continuity that I could follow, lore that actually has some thought put into it, and characters that are actual characters and not just vessels for blank slate archetypes, than another shitty, fan service-filled multiverse mess of a story any fucking day. Enough with the fucking multiverses. Anyway, Bayonetta is a strange series to have a multiverse story. It's not like there's a history of different Bayonetta versions to warrant a crossover with them all. It has never hinted that there would be different Bayonettas in other games. Yes, there's a time travel element in both Bayonetta and Bayonetta 2. Yes, the first game has you running around with a younger version of Bayonetta, but she is 100% implied to be a younger version of the same character that you are playing as, and that she will eventually grow up to become that Bayonetta, not a different Bayonetta from a different universe. It introduced a bit of a time loop concept, but not a multiverse concept. And yet here we are, stuck with a multiverse story that feels unearned, yet also devoid of the necessary fan service to make it appealing even as a casual multiverse experience, and by the end just devolves into complete nonsense. I really wish they didn't take this direction in the game, but they did. Bayonetta 3 also introduces a new character, Viola, to the series. She is basically Bayonetta's version of Nero from Devil May Cry. She's headstrong, quick to action, and kind of sloppy, but she plays more like Virgil from Devil May Cry. At first, I was bracing myself for Viola to be some cringy character that I wasn't going to like, but I very quickly realized that I actually do really like her as a character. She's actually really dorky and funny. Her insecurity and clumsiness provides a nice contrast to the elegant control that Bayonetta and Juan give off. She's a nice playable foil, and I genuinely liked her character, even if she was a multiverse hopper. I think her origin could have been better executed, but she's a well-written character. This mysterious Wolfman also appears early on in the game. His intentions aren't revealed until later, and I will discuss him later in detail, but I bring him up now just to set up the direction of the game.
You know, I rather enjoy teaching obedience. I'll have you rolling over in no time, Spot.
So the entire gist is the homunculi are going multiverse to multiverse and destroying them. Bayonetta has to go across the remaining multiverses to collect these chaos gears to power a singularity portal so that she can stop the homunculi threat. Viola leaves her destroyed multiverse seeking Bayonetta's help, Bayonetta goes after the chaos gears, Viola goes after the Wolfman, and Juan goes after a mysterious scientist who Viola says can help them stop singularity and save the multiverse. The stakes are big, and aside from my personal aversion to multiverses, it's a decently satisfying setup for an over-the-top adventure. Unfortunately, the rest of the story is full of peaks and valleys that eventually end in a trough. I'm going to talk more about the story later. I'm going to put a big spoiler warning before I get into it, but first and foremost, I need to discuss the gameplay, because the gameplay really carries this game. The core combat of Bayonetta 3 is great, honestly the best in the entire series in my opinion. At its most basic, the combat is fast and flashy, and even simple button mashing can make it look really cool. There are 14 different weapons for Bayonetta, each with their own upgrade trees, special moves to learn, and combos to pull off. You have 2 different weapons equipped at the same time that can be swapped between, allowing for different mix-ups as you swap mid-combo. Each weapon is associated with a different demon that alters Bayonetta's mobility, allowing for different ways to move around. And the franchise staple Witch Time is here. For those who don't know, Bayonetta can dodge attacks. If you execute a perfect dodge, time is slowed for a brief period of time, giving you an opening to get some powerful hits in on enemies.
Ready?
I found my favorite weapons to be the Color My World, Love is Blue, Scarborough Fair, the pistols. Yes to the first weapon you get. Love is Blue and Scarborough Fair are available if you have Bayonetta 1 and 2 saves, but they're so fun to use. I gravitated towards Color My World because Love is Blue and Scarborough Fair don't have a demon finishing attack, but I did prefer Scarborough Fair and Love is Blue for their advanced mobility options. And my favorite overall weapon was the Dead End Express. Basically these train cars that you use like chainsaws. They feel so satisfying to use as you rip into enemies. They provide a lot of opportunity for opening up enemies to combos during combat. They kind of remind me of the Cavalier from Devil May Cry 5 and how they feel. Every weapon has their own ranged attack used for maintaining combos from afar or juggling enemies in the air. All the weapons are creative though, and they all have their positives and negatives and allow for a plethora of different playstyles to be satisfied. There's everything from a whip, a microphone stand, a fan, a magician's tricks, to a fucking tombstone. I will say that your selection of weapon really just comes down to personal preference though. Enemies don't really have weaknesses to specific weapons. They don't have weak points that you need to exploit. So really you just use the weapon that you like best. There are some changes from previous Bayonetta games. For one, like I said, you can only equip 2 weapons at a time for you to toggle back and forth between. In Bayonetta 1 and 2, you could actually equip up to 4 different weapons because you could equip weapons to both Bayonetta's feet and hands. I'm a bit saddened by this change. One, because it was really fun to mix and match different weapons together to see how they worked in tandem with one another. You were able to pull off some really cool combinations that added even more depth to the combat and allowed you to express yourself in different ways. Limiting it down to 2 weapons takes away some of that depth and expressiveness, as you can't really create your own playstyles by combining different weapons together. But it also discourages you from using your entire arsenal. It's 2 less slots to equip weapons to, meaning you'll be sticking to fewer weapons for much more of the game. As an alternative, I wish you could switch between more weapons quickly, kind of like Dante's moveset from Devil May Cry 5. Additionally, the way torture attacks work and the magic system is different. In previous Bayonetta games, you needed to fill your climax bar in combat. Once filled, you could pull off a powerful torture attack to do massive damage or kill your opponent. The climax bar was replaced with a more traditional magic bar, with torture attacks becoming more context-sensitive attacks that trigger during combat. The magic bar is instead used to summon powerful demons. You can have up to 3 different demons equipped at one time, and toggle between each one. Each demon has their own skill tree, special moves, and combo potential. The way that these demon summons work mechanically kind of remind me of like V's moveset from Devil May Cry 5, and even Platinum Games' own Astral Chain. These demons are controlled through Bayonetta. While controlling the demons, you cannot control Bayonetta directly, which leaves her in a vulnerable state, but since they are controlled with held prompts, you can give demons directions, go back to controlling Bayonetta to dodge or attack while her demons carry out her orders. And I actually really liked the demon summoning mechanic. I felt like it was a natural and welcome addition to the Bayonetta gameplay loop. They added more movesets and abilities and all played different. Madama Butterfly plays more similarly to Bayonetta, with quick punches and kicks. Gamora is slow, but hits really hard. Malphus flies around and can pick enemies up. The war-trained Guan attacks enemies as it runs along a track that you set. I mostly found the demons useful as crowd control, to get large groups of enemies off of me, or specifically to fight large enemies, as the demons could make large enemies falter. The demons definitely had strategic use, and I didn't feel like they took away from the pacing of the combat at all. Their attacks feel extremely weighty too in comparison to Bayonetta's, which felt faster and more limber. Also, your demons can get in a frenzied state in which they attack you or even killed, which you can't use them until a cooldown timer goes down. So you can't just spam the demons and use them all the time. You kind of have to think strategically and make sure that you're managing their health, your magic, and all of these different systems all in tandem with one another. Switching back and forth between Bayonetta and her demon summons open up a lot of combat potential. You could lead with a demon to break up a tight mob, and then pick them off one by one as Bayonetta, using the demon to break up the mob again as they regroup. Or start off with Bayonetta, launching an enemy into the air to get some big hits in, and then summoning the demon to mop up the remaining enemies, or take care of a big guy that shows up after the mob was whittled down. It feels incredibly satisfying to rack up high-scoring combos, utilizing all the weapons and abilities at your disposal, and the game rewards skillful play with medals that equate to experience and currency that can be used for upgrades or in the shop for items and collectibles. The better your combos, the less damage you take, the more varied your moves, the faster you complete combat encounters, the more rewards you are given. They revamped how the game scores you at the end of a level, and your rank is no longer penalized for using healing items, you just lose some experience orbs. You can still score platinum or pure platinum ranking while using healing items, but that's not the end of combat. A large part of this game is also spent playing as Viola, who, aside from having a different, really catchy theme song, plays completely different from Bayonetta. As I said, she reminds me of Virgil from Devil May Cry. She uses a long katana, relying on quick slashes to dispose of her enemies. This is her only main weapon, meaning she has a lot less combat options than Bayonetta, but she also has throwing darts to use as her ranged attack. She has her own special moves and combo potential. She also has her own demon summon, only one, Cheshire, a giant demon cat, which fights independently from her. So you don't need to control this one like Bayonetta's slaves, but as an offset, Viola cannot carry her sword in combat while Cheshire is out fighting. Her biggest change, however, is the way that she initiates Witch Time. She doesn't dodge, you need to parry. I could not get it down in Bayonetta 3. The timing for parrying feels completely different to Bayonetta's dodging for Witch Time. So I'd be trying to parry in the same timing that I got down for Bayonetta's dodges, and it just wasn't working. It completely throws off the muscle memory. Additionally, with Bayonetta's dodging, even if you miffed the perfect dodge for the Witch Time, you would still get a dodge in to avoid getting hit by an attack. With Viola, if you miffed a parry, you would still take damage. Your parries need to be exact, too, in order to get sufficient usable Witch Time. Because if you just narrowly get your parry in, the Witch Time would only trigger for a fraction of a second. It requires the most specific timing to pull off, and it was just so fucking frustrating. It honestly ruined Viola's sections for me early on. They felt impossible, and I just did not get it, and eventually I said, fuck parrying, I'll just run around and jump to avoid getting hit, and it worked out much better. I have an easier time parrying in Dark Souls compared to this game. Her challenge sections requiring her to kill enemies in Witch Time were especially tedious. They would sometimes take me upwards of an hour to complete, and I never once felt like I actually completed it based on skill. I always felt like I just lucked out. I would get to the point where I would literally just spam the parry button and pray that it triggered when an enemy hit me. I have no idea what the actual timing is for this shit. Okay, here's where I have to pause the video and make a quick side note here. They did in fact patch the game. It looks like they've completely fixed how Viola feels to play, so disregard everything I said just there. It looks like that was not intentional, and they fixed it, and she feels a lot better to play. So good on Platinum for that one. So yeah, now that Viola is fixed, she's actually a lot of fun to play as, so I don't know what was up at first, but they fixed her, and I'm very glad. Aside from the bullshit pairing, I liked Viola as something different from Bayonetta. I definitely prefer Bayonetta's sections, but Viola was still fun in her own way, kind of like Dante vs. Virgil feel. So that's the core of Bayonetta 3's gameplay, the main combat loops, Bayonetta's and Viola's, and learning their combat is the most fun that this game has to offer, and it is a lot of fun. Like I said, there are times I feel the combat is best in the whole series. The game also features some decent puzzle-like challenges that require you to explore around in a level as you hunt down unlockables, hearts to increase your health, moonstones to increase your magic, open chests, fight chest monsters, chase down a hidden cat, frog, and crow in each level, etc. And I found the boss fights to all be really enjoyable. They're so crazy and chaotic and really highlight the intensity of the combat. The final boss especially really highlights how crazy Bayonetta can get, and I thought it was a great final battle that, aside from having an abundance of health items, was a real challenge. It was a hype boss for sure. There's also these kaiju battle sections and Juan's levels. The kaiju sections certainly are a slower change of pace, almost too slow at times, as you control these lumbering giant demons slowly attacking other giant enemies. I love kaiju movies, so I did get a kick out of these sections, but it also just did not fit the generally faster pace of Bayonetta, and I can see how somebody might find these sections to be a slog, especially on repeat playthroughs. Luckily, they are far and few between, so even if you hate these parts, I don't think they would ruin the overall game experience for you. I personally like how wild and out there some of these minigames can get. Not all of them are these giant kaiju battles, which people seem to be complaining about, and they play off the insane zaniness that Bayonetta can sometimes have. There's this part where Bayonetta rips out her heart and summons a giant demon frog. The demon frog molts and reveals this giant singer. The game then becomes a rhythm game where you have to place shields to the rhythm of the music to stop oncoming attacks. While she's singing, these zombie hands with glow sticks come out of the ground. It's absolutely insane, and how can you not love this section? The Juan sections see the game become a side-scrolling stealth game, where you play as Juan infiltrating science labs. Combat during these sections is really stripped down, reminiscent of Bayonetta's combat, but much more limiting and simplistic. The focus is on sneaking around and stealth killing enemies more so than engaging in any real combat. You can also get powerful guns from boxes with limited ammo for when you find yourself needing to fight, or for the bosses of these sections. It's overall okay. Again, I didn't love these sections, but I didn't really hate them either. So for most games, I would stop here, with a generally positive review and my recommendation to play it. Despite the occasional tedious or pace-breaking side objectives, Bayonetta 3 delivers a top-notch combat experience expected of an action game of this caliber. It's fast-paced, combo-focused, and rewards players for skillful play by giving more currency for better performance at the end of levels. It features a bunch of weapons to master, a good variety of different enemies to overcome. If you're looking for an action game to play based on gameplay alone, Bayonetta 3 is an easy recommend for me. However, now is where I get into the game's story, because it is an utter fucking mess. If you don't care about the story, or don't want anything spoiled, please like the video, leave a comment, and close this video out. Thank you for watching and your support, but the rest of this video is going to be about the story, and especially the ending, because I need to discuss this. Story discussion starts now. So as I mentioned at the beginning of the video, I am a gameplay first kind of guy. A game with good story is definitely a good thing, but a game with good gameplay and crap story will always be better to me than a game with good story and crap gameplay. That's just how I am. So I do genuinely still recommend Bayonetta 3 as a game with good gameplay, first and foremost. But I cannot ignore the direction that this story went for this game. I cannot ignore how bad the ending for this game was, and I cannot ignore how they set up the franchise going forward. The game actually starts with a combat scenario where you play as a Bayonetta who is dressed like how she looked like in the first game. She is defeated by the big bad of Bayonetta 3, Singularity, a homunculus capable of destroying entire universes. This Bayonetta is defeated, and her universe is destroyed, but before it is fully destroyed, Viola escapes and finds herself in the universe of the Bayonetta that we know and love. This Bayonetta is dressed in new clothes, with her hair reminiscent of her younger self, Cereza. This is where we're introduced to the other characters and homunculi, and the general plot points that I mentioned at the beginning of this review. The main focus of the story finds Bayonetta traveling through multiverses to meet with other Bayonettas in an attempt to save their universes from being destroyed by Singularity. None of these other Bayonettas are interesting. They're like action figures. We got kawaii Japanese Bayonetta, a Chinese Dynasty Bayonetta, the Egyptian Queen Bayonetta, and a French Thief Bayonetta. Empty, hollow archetypes, not real characters. At this point, I found the multiverse angle annoying, but it still didn't ruin the game for me. These Bayonettas were basically excuses to give you new weapons, demons, and unlockable skins. Some of the designs were cool, and of course the new weapons and demons were great. Additionally, every one of these Bayonettas were killed by Singularity, and their universes were destroyed, which I really liked. To me, they were establishing our Bayonetta as the Bayonetta. So we had a multiverse story where, at the end, we would still be left with one Bayonetta, the Bayonetta that we know and love, that is the true Bayonetta. That felt like a good way to get out of the multiverse story and also reestablish our Bayonetta as the protagonist going forward out of Bayonetta 3. If you're going to have an unnecessary multiverse story, I absolutely like the idea of killing off the other versions and establishing the original as the true main version, so that some semblance of character and continuity is maintained. Once I realized that was going on, I was back on board for the game's story. Unfortunately, this wasn't really what was going on, and the bullshit didn't stop. Bayonetta 3 throws a bunch of twists right at the end of the game. So first, the scientist who Juan was tasked with rescuing turned out to be the creator of Singularity the whole time. So Juan rescues the scientist who destroys the multiverses. This twist was predictable, but I didn't hate it. Juan is unceremoniously killed. Bayonetta doesn't even know that she is killed at this point. She isn't there to see it. Now, I'm not one of those weirdos who thinks that killing main characters can't happen. Characters dying establish real stakes, and killing off Juan was a real surprise. I was not expecting it, so it felt like a shock for sure, but killing her off without being able to see Bayonetta's response did feel like a bit of a missed opportunity to me. Maybe that would have been too tropey, but still. I'm not negative about this specific twist. I actually think killing off Juan was a ballsy move that established real stakes. Even if I like Juan and didn't want to see her die, that's life, and sometimes the characters that you like die. Anyways, the next twists are where things start to go downhill for me. First, there's Luca, who, through the first two games, is this bumbling, clumsy guy. He's funny and charming, but a total goofball. He starts off antagonistic towards Bayonetta, but eventually warms up to her and becomes her distant love interest, as they constantly flirt during missions. But above all, he is a human. In this world of demons and angels, witches and sages, he doesn't have powers, which is what made him so compelling to me. He's just a normal guy who finds himself in situations way beyond his ability, yet he finds the courage and tenacity to do the right thing. He's a nice foil to Bayonetta, who's badass and strong in every single way. Well, remember that werewolf guy that Viola was searching for? Yeah, he's Luca. And at first, I wasn't even off the ship when they revealed it. My initial thought was, homunculi are man-made monsters. Maybe Luca got somehow experimented on, or manipulated by Singularity, and that's why he's suffering from these werewolf powers, and he'll be cured by the end. But no, he isn't a homunculi. He's a fucking demon. Why the fuck is Luca a demon? Just completely stripped him of the thing that made him the most interesting, his being human. I really hated that they made him a demon. Then we see this other multiverse version of Luca where he's this powerful elf-like being, and it's revealed that Luca's purpose in the multiverse is to ensure that Bayonetta always succeeds. He's not just a charming idiot, no, he's a fucking magical being whose destiny is tied to helping Bayonetta. I don't understand.
I'll always love you both.
It's then revealed that Viola is actually Bayonetta and Luca's daughter, which, I'm going to be completely honest, was pretty obvious. Viola is also a bumbling goofball. She does the VIOLA thing just like Luca does his LUCA thing.
That's right, the one and only LUKA.
My name is Viola. VIOL fucking A. Viola.
Her demon is named Cheshire, which is Bayonetta's nickname for Luca. It was obvious, and honestly, I like it. I liked this twist. I liked the confirmation that Bayonetta and Luca shack up. It adds more charm to Viola's clumsiness. I like it. Sue me. But what came next is what ruined this story for me. It's such a frustrating mess of an ending. So remember when I said that I liked that even though this was a multiverse story, I liked that the variant Bayonettas were all getting killed off so that the true Bayonetta would be left and we would continue the story as a normal continuity following the one Bayonetta when this was all over? Yeah, well, they threw that out the fucking window. As Bayonetta is about to be defeated by Singularity towards the end of the game, 2 more Bayonettas appear from the multiverse. The Bayonettas from the first and second game. I know that this was meant to be a super hype fan service moment, like, oh shit, the Bayonettas from the other games are here. But it didn't feel that way at all because she is supposed to be the same character. This isn't some instance where I can see some fan service appeal. Like if this was Devil May Cry and Dante was about to lose and Dante from DMC showed up. Sure, I get it, it's an alternate Dante. I get that fan service appeal. But up until this point, there was only one Bayonetta through these 3 games. We experienced her journey in a chronological sense from Game 1 to Game 2 to Game 3. But now, this isn't one character's journey. All the Bayonettas from all 3 games are different fucking Bayonettas. This means the continuity doesn't exist. This means that each story is isolated from the last. This means that none of the story from the first or second game matters because they're just random journeys by different Bayonettas in the multiverse. Bayonetta has no continuity. Nothing matters and we're just experiencing random, unrelated, separate events that don't have anything to do with one another. Fantastic. Way to completely ruin your world building and lore and character development. So Bayonetta 1 and Bayonetta 2 give their powers to Bayonetta 3, and they fight the final boss as this Super Bayonetta, which from a gameplay perspective was pretty hype, but I was still shocked that they went this route, and kind of pissed that all these Bayonettas were separate people. So you defeat the boss, and despite all this, Bayonetta is killed anyway. Yeah, Bayonetta fucking dies. She shares one last kiss with Luca and fades away, and the credits roll. Then there's one last boss fight where Viola fights a shade of Bayonetta. From a boss perspective, the fight is actually cool and fun. It's Viola's greatest challenge, and it does push your skills with Viola, and I enjoyed the fight. The fight ends with Bayonetta sharing a final word with Viola, more credits roll, and we're greeted with a post-credit scene where Viola takes Bayonetta's name. That's right, folks, not only does Bayonetta 3 go full comic books with a multiverse, it also goes full comic books with mantle passing.
Shit, my bad. Forgot to use the family name. Be back by curfew. Bayonetta.
Which now has me worried for the future of the series. I like Viola, I genuinely do, but I don't like the idea of her becoming Bayonetta. And while I like her, she doesn't have the same bravado, charisma, and sex appeal that Bayonetta does to lead the franchise. I would love to see Viola continue in the series. I'm more than happy for her to be a playable character, but I also want Bayonetta back, and I hope she returns, the actual Bayonetta in Bayonetta 4. I know this was a long rant, but man, the direction that they took the series at the end here, I don't know how else to describe it other than I am shocked. Bayonetta Origins was announced, and it looks good, albeit extremely different. I'm glad Bayonetta is continuing, and as long as the gameplay aspect remains intact, I'm sure I'll find enjoyment in the games. But I can't help but feel disappointed that this is the direction that they took the story. I'm interested to see how Bayonetta Origins ties everything together. I'm interested to see where they take Bayonetta 4, but as for now, all I can do is reflect on how much of a mess I feel that this story became at the end, which is a shame, because that is mucking up an otherwise extremely positive experience from the gameplay perspective. I know this was a long one, so thanks for staying and watching and listening to me rant. The TLDR, play Bayonetta 3 for the gameplay, not the story. Please leave a comment and let me know what you think of Bayonetta 3, and subscribe and all that fun stuff. Thanks for watching.
Ah, shit! Stop, 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 stop!
Luca?
Sorry to keep you ladies waiting.